carbon footprint is something I think which is well known and talked about. But the water footprint of AI, I think, doesn't quite get the same limelight.
It is estimated that by the year 2027, the combined Scope 1 and Scope 2 water withdrawal of global AI will be around 4.2 to 6.6 billion cubic meters.
The International Energy Agency estimated that already in 2022, the data centers accounted for 1 to 1.5% of the global electricity consumption. And this is even before AI had taken off.
So until the source of electricity in our grids transitions from fossil fuels,
Hi, I'm Chitra.
Hello, I'm Abhi. Welcome to the first episode of our podcast, TheCabEffect.
Abhi, do you also want to talk about why we are calling our podcast The Cab Effect?
Absolutely. Chitra, something that happens with me a lot is that I would hop into a cab and I end up having the most profoundest of discussions with the cab drivers. It's almost as if you're in this magical space. You're not at your destination, you're not where you were. So the net effect is that you're very present in the moment. You end up having very honest conversations about things that you care the most about.
So in our podcast, just like in a cab, we are going to be having these honest conversations about the things that matter.
Precisely. The idea behind the podcast is to exercise the power that we all have thanks to democratization of information with your internet and YouTube and whatnot, and use this information to satisfy this urge in ourselves to understand the most pressing issues of our times. Rather, I should say, begin to understand the issues and the nuances, and in the process, share what we learn with those who are just as curious as we are.
Absolutely. And to us, the important issues are the ones that are related to living a healthy, fruitful, and dignified life. So here we are.
Here we are. With that, a big shout out to our sponsors.
Except that we don't have any yet.
Well, in that case, let's talk about our credentials. We have laptops with Google search and internet on it, and we have access to the environment and the living beings in it.
That's very reassuring indeed.
Well, on a slightly irrelevant note though, besides the internet and Google search, Chitra does come with more than 20 years of experience working on environmental issues and on social justice. Chitra has worked extensively in the policy space on solid waste, plastic, electronic waste, and air pollution. Chitra has also worked closely with artisans in handicraft, primarily on connecting them with resources and opportunities on the path towards economic self-sufficiency. But personally, the aspect that impresses me the most is that she is fluent in 5 languages and has actually gone back to school to work on the 6th one, which is Japanese.
Thank you. That's a very kind description.
Well, I speak just 2 languages, and I've flirted with French and Deutsch languages fairly unsuccessfully. So huge admiration for people who can speak multiple languages.
It does get a little tougher as we grow older, doesn't it?
I'd like to believe that.
Abhi might not speak as many languages, but he comes with 16 years of experience, starting off as a technology professional, transitioning to strategy and operations consulting in industries like healthcare and communications, and finally making the switch to the development sector, where his work includes projects around circular economy, air pollution, e-waste, plastics, climate change adaptation, to name a few. Right. So with the introductions out of the way, Abhi, what's on the agenda today? How has the year been so far?
Thought-provoking, Something I like to do every few years, Chitra, is to take a stock of where the world is heading. What are the kind of problems people are working on? What are the skills they are using to solve those problems? And my primary goal in doing so is to understand how I should, upskill myself, or rather, to use the jargon, I would say how I should pivot myself.
So are there any themes that stand out for the next pivot?
Well, AI, clearly, right? Artificial intelligence. Whether you look at the news, you scroll through your reels on Instagram, everyone's talking about AI, and rightly so. The use cases are tremendous. Opportunities seem unlimited when it comes to AI. Whether you're talking about space research, medicine, or even climate change mitigation, I think AI finds a role to play everywhere. But as I was doing my research, as always, I went down this rabbit hole and learned more about the huge detrimental environmental impact of AI. And we're not just we're talking not just about carbon footprint, but also about water footprint here.
I agree with you. Carbon footprint is something I think which is well known and talked about. But the water footprint of I think, doesn't quite get the same limelight. But does this statement still hold true about the environmental impact of AI? After the announcement by the Chinese AI company DeepSeek about its most recent model, DeepSeek R1, which I believe is much, much more efficient and cheaper than the American models out there.
Well, valid question. More efficient models, less resource intensive models were bound to come up. That's just how technology progresses, especially more so when faced with resource constraints. But I still believe that the cumulative environmental impact of global AI is only going to increase and increase rapidly. I mean, I would love to be proved wrong. Everyone's talking about Jevons paradox in the context of AI. So Jevons paradox is this economic theory that states that technological advancements that make the use of one resource more efficient can actually result in more consumption, more use of that resource. Now, if there's anything history has taught us, it's that there is no end to how much we can consume. You make more efficient computer chips, we'll consume more of them to do more stuff. You come up with more efficient AI models, we'll find more use cases for them for a greater number of people. That's just how it is. So the very real possibility of more efficient models should not detract us from keeping our eye on the environmental impact of AI and the data centers.
I agree. That does make sense to me. So then let's go back to the water footprint of AI that you were talking about.
Now, according to researchers at University of California, Riverside and University of Texas, Arlington, training of GPT-3, which is your generative AI model that was the predecessor to GPT-4, itself required around 185,000 gallons of water, which is around 700,000 liters of water. And this is just scope 1 water consumption that we are talking about. In addition, it consumes around 500 ml bottle of water for every 10 to 50 responses. One statistic that blew my mind was that it is estimated that by the year 2027, the combined scope 1 and scope 2 water withdrawal of global AI will be around 4.2 to 6.6 billion cubic meters. Now, to put this figure in perspective, this is around 4 to 6 times the water withdrawal of the country Denmark.
Wow. Those are really staggering figures. But I do feel that there are a few terminologies and specific terms that are floating around here that might seem a little confusing. So let's break things down a bit. Mm-hmm. Let's start with AI. What AI means, how does it work conceptually? How is its work connected to water and energy usage? As per my understanding, AI or artificial intelligence is a technology that allows machines or computers to simulate human intelligence, like solving problems, drawing inferences, and even making decisions. Most people like me, for instance, we primarily use and are exposed to generative AI, a technology that can create original text, images, based on patterns learned from existing data. Abhi, I personally find ChatGPT very helpful. For example, when I want to edit a text to make it more concise and clear. For example, when I'm writing an important email. But when it comes to written content that I consider to be my own intellectual property and I actually take pride in it, I do draw the line in using ChatGPT there.
A fair point. AI is based on machine learning and deep learning technologies. At the risk of oversimplifying, think of these huge machines that includes your physical servers, data storage, networking equipment, power and cooling systems, etc., with tremendous computing power, all housed in these giant warehouses that are your data centers. And huge amount of historical data and information is fed to the algorithms run on these machines for these algorithms to basically learn from.
So that would be the training of the model.
Exactly. That learning is the training of the model. And once you have these models that are trained, when people like you or me, we write a queries or prompts to the model goes back to its learning, its training, it draws from it, and it spits out the response to us.
And this response is the inference.
Exactly.
So would it be accurate to say that both the training and the inference process are carbon and water intensive?
That's right. Both of these processes are. Yes.
So focusing on the water consumption, is this the water that is consumed in the cooling process for the data centers to remove the excessive heat? I assume this is similar to the radiator in our cars.
I think that's a good analogy. Yes. So we have your, cooling towers, your chillers, liquid cooling systems. They're all used to take out, remove heat from the data centers, and they all use water.
And you were also alluding to scope 1, 2, and 3 water consumption. Is this scope on the same lines as scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emission?
That's exactly what it is, yes.
So scope 1 water consumption would be the water that is consumed at the data center itself, primarily in the cooling process. Scope 2 would be the indirect water consumption that happens, say, in the generation of electricity off-site, that is again supplied to the data centers. Scope 3 would be the water consumption that happens across the supply chain, for example, in a semiconductor factory where chips are being manufactured to be used in the data center.
That's spot on, yeah.
So I think I might be missing something here. Why can't we just fill a required amount of water in the cooling system and just let it run forever in it?
I had the same question in my mind as I was doing my research. But before we can get into answering that question, I think it would be beneficial for us to understand two key metrics that together are used to understand water usage. One of them is water withdrawal, and the other is water consumption. Let's take an example to understand this. Let's say I run this factory that manufactures soup. And let's say each day to run these operations, I take 10,000 liters of water from a nearby river. So my water withdrawal, my daily water withdrawal is 10,000 liters. That's metric 1. Now let's say I use this water for a couple of different purposes. One is I circulate part of this water around in my factory to take out heat from the factory and basically to cool down the factory, right? So in this process, part of the water gets heated up and is lost. So let's say I lose 1,000 liters of water daily like this. Now, let's say I use the remaining water to manufacture the soup. So I put it in the manufacturing process. Let's say each day I use another 1,000 liters of water for this purpose. And the remaining water, I treat it, I recycle it, and I discharge it back into the environment. So my water consumption then is the 1,000 liter plus this another 1,000 liter, that is 2,000 liters of water.
Interesting. So both these metrics, water withdrawal and water consumption, these help us together understand the competition for and the dependency on the scarce water resources in an area.
That's exactly right. I think both the metrics together give the complete picture.
So how does this connect to my earlier question of filling the cooling system with the required amount of water and letting it run forever in it?
Right. So just like in the soup factory, even in the data centers, as the water circulates to cool down the data center, the water gets heated up and evaporates. So a part of water is lost in this manner, and you need to replenish this water. So that's reason one. And the second reason is that as this water circulates, salts and minerals get dissolved in this water. And this reduces the efficacy of water in cooling the systems. So after some cycles, you have to discharge this water and replace it with, new fresh water.
Right. That helps. So, water scarcity and stress hits very close to home. When you look at India, we are home to about 18% of the global population, but our freshwater resources stand at just 4%. Bangalore, which is the tech capital of India and might end up leveraging AI to solve some of the world's most complex problems, came very close to running short of water in 2024. And according to the World Resources Institute, 25 countries that are together home to about 25% of the global population face an extremely high water stress every year.
So I'm assuming India is one of those 25 countries?
Unfortunately, yes.
Right. And you mentioned this measure, extreme high water stress. What does this measurement actually mean?
Well, an extremely high water stress country is one that is using at least 80% of its available water supply. But I think water stress and its overall human and economic impact is actually a giant topic. And we could pick it up another day. For now, let's get back to AI and data centers. Mm-hmm. So what information do we have about where these data centers are located?
So I did try looking that information up, and I got different numbers based on the source I was looking at. But according to CloudScene, United States is home to around 5,000 data centers, which is approximately 45% of the total data centers in the world. The US is followed by Germany, the UK, and China, and each has around 500 data centers. I think India has close to 150 data centers. Now, I'm not sure what kind of data centers these are, what are their sizes, which of these are AI-enabled versus which are not. But one thing's for sure, that as the demand for AI is taking off, the demand for data center capacity is also taking off, obviously, right? According to the consulting firm McKinsey's report, the demand for AI-enabled data center capacity will increase at an average rate of 33% each year between 2023 and 2030. And this is just a mid-range scenario. It is also estimated that by 2030, the 70% of total demand for data center capacity will be for advanced AI-enabled data centers.
So considering that this demand is most likely going to be fulfilled, so it's not just the water aspect, but the carbon footprint of AI is also going to increase rapidly. Yeah. So data centers use a lot of energy, specifically electricity. And electricity, as we know, is dependent on fossil fuels. The International Energy Agency estimated that already in 2022, the data centers accounted for 1 to 1.5% of the global electricity consumption. And this is even before AI had taken off. Also, a Morgan Stanley research projected that the global emissions from data centers would be 2.5 billion metric tons by 2030. So to put this figure in perspective, 2.5 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent equals the emissions from 714 coal power plants running an entire year. So Abhi, can you imagine the scale of the challenge that we are dealing with here?
Wow, one never really thinks of the impact of data center in the same lens as one thinks of coal power plants. So this is very, very eye-opening. But if I were to summarize what I just heard, we're saying that these data centers consume huge amount of electricity, and most of this electricity comes from fossil fuels that emit greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide that result in global warming and thus climate change. So until the source of electricity in our grids transitions from fossil fuels to renewable or clean energy solutions or sources, the data centers will continue to have this tremendous impact and contribution to greenhouse gas emissions and thus climate change, right?
Absolutely.
Wow. According to World Health Organization, climate change will be responsible for an additional 250,000 deaths each year between 2030 and 2050. And this is due to undernourishment, malaria, diarrhea, heat stress. On top of this, you have your extreme weather events that are getting more severe and more frequent, again, due to climate change. I'm talking about weather events such as forest fires, cyclones, floods, droughts, etc. And all of these have tremendous economic impact, and even more importantly, have tremendous impact on human lives, even loss of human lives. So we're talking about something extremely serious here. Even the global tech giants, the hyperscalers, such as the Googles that we've been talking about, they all have made their own environmental commitments around net zero targets, around water conservation targets. But I believe that with this demand for AI taking off, the focus on AI, some of these targets will get derailed.
Oh yes, they might actually get derailed. I think we'll have a lot more to discuss about AI and its environmental impact, but we are at a good stopping point here for today. In part 2 of this episode, we can delve further into how focusing on AI might impact the environmental targets that big corporations have set for themselves, and also on the role of renewables in powering data centers. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds good to me. So, would you say that the cab has reached its destination for today?
I think it has. But a quick request for our listeners. If there's anything that we talked today that you would like to add to, please write to us and tell us. Our email ID is TheCabEffect@gmail.com.
With that, I think it's time to say goodbye to you and to everyone. We'll be back again soon with another episode to take the conversation forward.
Until then, take care, everyone.